Welcome back to Rethink Weight Loss. It's day 2 of 5 days. There is a secret that it's truly healthy eating that gets us to slender, that gets us to naturally slender. It's not pills, it's not surgeries, it's not any kind of horrible way of trying to force our body. It's not eating less is the big message today. Eat less is terrible weight loss advice, right? 5-day challenge to a slender, healthy eating psychology. Losing the mindset that I just have to eat less. I have found it takes quite a bit of repetition and exploration because it's what has been told to us pretty much our whole lives. And so I'm going to explain today what is actually going on here and why is eat less terrible advice for living slender. All right, so I talked yesterday about how when UCLA researchers looked for what are the results of dieting, of weight loss dieting, if you look at people 2 years later or more, and the results are terrible, right? So some people say it's as low as 1%. The UCLA researchers ended up concluding we'd be better off never dieting. It's actually destructive to our metabolism, destructive to our health. Weight loss dieting is the best predictor of weight gain down the road, right? So we have heard this for a long time. We've heard, I know dieting isn't good, but I want to make sure we make it really clear what we're talking about, because hearing the idea over and over that dieting isn't good, eating less isn't the way, is not giving us very clear understandings of, well, why isn't it the way and why do they keep telling us it's the way, right? So I want to make that clearer today. Yay, Catherine's here. All right. I'm happy you're here, Catherine. All right. So eat less is terrible advice for living healthfully slender. It's really driving me nuts right now that Oprah is promoting everybody should go on these weight loss pills. There's a lot of promotion of I've got to make my body respond because trying to change my eating isn't working. And it's because what they're trying doesn't work. It doesn't work for healthy, sustainable weight loss. So I want to give you more, I want to arm you a bit with more information about what are we talking about here. I grew up with the advice, you're just going to have to eat less. And it seemed like it was right. It seemed like it worked in my 20s and 30s. And then it stopped working and stopped working and stopped working. And I was really confused, like how much less do I have to eat? I think about Lily, I'll talk about her in a minute, but she's someone who was very disciplined. I think about Michaelina, very disciplined with dieting. Michaelina and Lily were both these very disciplined dieters, and they felt like they did very well. I think they felt really virtuous, like I'm one of the more disciplined people I know, and I've been able to stay slender because of it. And all those people who aren't slender, this is how I felt. All the people who aren't slender must be eating crazy amounts of food. Well, that's not true. We think that way because we were raised in this environment where we're told to eat less to get slender, and it's just not the right way. So doctors and researchers that specialize in obesity more and more are recognizing overeating is not actually the big driver of obesity, and that calorie cutting, prioritizing calorie cutting, this is the number one mistake people are making when they want to lose weight. People talk about it like it's got to work because it's one of the principles of thermodynamics. It's a physics principle. It's got to work that if you reduce your calories coming in or you increase your calories going out, your body has to release excess weight. And it only does that temporarily because our bodies are not just subject to the principles of physics. Our bodies have intricately balanced biological systems to protect our survival. One of the ways that our body does that is by slowing our metabolism, right? Oh, we're not getting enough food. We've got to do something to protect against starvation right now. And it's very good at that. So slowing our metabolism is one thing it does. So even when we're sleeping, we're burning less calories. This is to help us survive when we're not getting enough calories, when we're not getting enough food. So if I start exercising a lot more, my body is like, this is cool. Nope, this is too much. We're not we're burning too many calories now, we've got to slow our metabolism. The other thing it does is changes the hormones in our body that tell us if we're hungry or if we've had enough to eat and we should now get active and go do something. So those hormone systems we find are very messed up in our society these days. So we're feeling way more hunger than we should be feeling. Another hormone that's very messed up in this dieting culture is cortisol. So when we go on a diet or even just start counting our calories, we see cortisol goes up. Now, that might not be a bad thing in a particular moment where we need to like lift a car off a baby, right? But if we're chronically experiencing excess cortisol, then we're going to feel this, we're going to feel anxious. So in dieting culture and with the dieting behavior, what our body does is it starts telling us you need to eat more, you're hungry. It starts making us anxious. So we start wandering around looking for food, feeling edgy, right? It also makes us sluggish at the same time. So we may be wandering around the kitchen looking for food, but otherwise we're sitting down. Really, we see this in research conditions with rats. When the functioning of our leptin hormones changes, we get couch potato syndrome, and we also get hungry. So I'll move across the cage if there's food, but otherwise, like if there's a girl rat, I'm not going over there. I don't have the energy for all that, right? It's what I started realizing is I want to really a little better appreciate how my body works and do what's going to be helpful for it, right? So our metabolism slows down, we get hungry, we get anxious, we start foraging for more food. I'm going to talk about how researchers are conceptualizing what this means, what this looks like in nature. Because to finally do what actually works, I think of it this way. There's the path of what doesn't work that leads to, okay, this is the best way to gain weight over time. I may lose weight initially, but I'm going to gain weight over time. That's one path. That's the path most people are on. We want to step onto a whole different path that works completely differently. As I asserted yesterday, I'm going to assert all week. It's eating in a truly healthful way that gets us naturally slender, which is our natural state, right? It's not natural for animals, including humans, to be overweight. It's not advantageous unless there are certain conditions like living in a low food environment or getting ready to hibernate. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But first, I'm really trying to get this point across that in order to succeed with healthy eating and sustainable weight loss, we have to stop doing this eat less approach. It's not the right approach. It takes your brain and your habits in the wrong direction. And at first, it might seem to work. So many situations like this that the human brain has trouble with. If it seems to work in the moment, so if I start eating less, within a few days, I might see my weight go down. It feels like it's working, just that over time, our body compensates. So it's hard to get that wisdom, right? So I'm trying to invite you into a space of greater wisdom and appreciation for how your body works so you can work with your body instead of fighting it. That plate on the left looks like I'm fighting my body. I'm trying to force it to let go, right? All right, and I love to share this concept. So researchers are understanding a lot better now. A calorie is not a calorie, right? So if I have 100 calories of cookies, of processed food, or I have 100 calories of berries, is my body going to do the same thing? Absolutely not. One of them is going to help my body be its best. It's going to help me feel good. It's going to help me function well. It's going to give me energy, right? If I eat the processed food, the body's going to have to cope with something that it doesn't recognize as food. It's going to have to cope with excess sugar in the system. It's going to have to figure out, okay, we got some excesses going on. At the same time, we have an inadequacy of nutrition. So I felt like I was eating, but I didn't get any nutrition. I'm going to change how leptin's functioning. I'm going to make you hungry. I'm going to make you anxious. And I'm going to start storing excess fat. I want to explain why our body starts storing excess fat. But when you hear me talk about the berries make me feel energized, ready to go do something, they're nourishing, they're truly nourishing. The processed food makes me feel hungry and low energy and like I just want to go lay down. and eat more at the same time, right? It makes a massive difference to our body which of those 100 calories we choose. And this whole focus on calories has obscured that whole principle that it really matters to our body. Our body's going to do completely different things. And so with the non-nutritious food-like substances, the processed food, our body's going to make us hungry. It's going to start storing excess fat, slowing our metabolism. So does that make sense? A calorie is not a calorie. And all the apps and all the devices and all the calorie cutting advice that we get is leading us into a false narrative that's going to lead us into behaviors that are going to prove detrimental to our health, and they're not going to prove successful as far as weight loss either. What do you guys think? A calorie is not a calorie. Does that make sense? It's not helpful to focus on calories. Makes me mad. So it's terrible advice. Focus on calories, just eat less calories. Terrible advice. Step off that path altogether. And I know, like, even last year when I went for a colonoscopy and I had to fast, right? Yeah, I thought I had this idea in my head. Oh, good, maybe I'll lose more weight. What? It's just so ingrained in us, right? I think I just have to eat less. Nature wants us to be fat. This book is very, very interesting. These scientists who were studying diabetes and trying to figure out what is going on. Why do we have so much diabetes in our society? They came to this conclusion: nature wants us to eat foods that help us store fat. What I'm suggesting is we have to eat very differently. We have to eat in a way that our bodies feel like we're good. We're getting enough nutrition. So that's the real understanding that I started seeing in my body. I started seeing in the results in hundreds and hundreds of people eating the way that I discovered slender weight eating. In the food environment we live in, what happens inside our body is very problematic, much more than we think, because we think all those processed foods are pretty benign. We know we shouldn't have too much of them, but we like them and we try to pick healthy alternatives. I found that if I can focus on nourishing my body in an abundant, in a thorough, comprehensive kind of way, and not focus on the quantity I'm eating so much, but the quality of my food, I'm going to do much, much better. And figuring out what's quality food in our environment is tricky. Getting super clear what our body actually needs to be well, this is worth working on. This is worth fighting for, right? Figuring out what truly are the healthy foods my body needs and not being tricked by the food environment that's telling us this is pretty healthy. You could have a little of this, a little of that won't hurt anything. We need to get clear, how much of these things do we actually have to eat to get the big results? And it can help to see the evidence for what actually works and to have a little bit of understanding why. Like, I love reading these books. They have a certain amount of biology that's a bit over my head, but reading through the biological explanations is still helpful. I'm making the case that the environment we all grew up in is deranged, nutritionally deranged. So we have to step very off the path we've been on and onto a clearly different, proven, effective path. So our eating changed over the last 100 or so years in big ways. In the last 60 years, even more than before. And when our eating changed, obesity rates skyrocketed. So in 1890, only 1 in 30 people were obese. Do you know what the rate is now? 1 in 3. That was in 2000. It's even higher than that now. So from 1890 to the year 2000, obesity rates went up 1,000%. Not 10%, not 20, not even 100. They went up 1,000%. This is not normal. It's not normal. There are people who are going to have obesity because of some kind of damage to their brain, for example, etc. Most of us are developing overweight and obesity that is not like that. It's related to the way we're eating. And when we change the way we're eating in the right ways that make our body happy, we do not have to be overweight or obese. It's not a natural, healthy condition. Obesity rates are now about 40%. So 4 out of 10, where it used to be 1 out of 30. And it's expected that these rates will be 50% by 2030. This is just, I feel like it's the canary in the coal mine. It's not the whole point. It's just the indicator we have that our bodies are losing health in big ways, that we're not feeding our bodies right. In one generation, just from 1960 to 2010, the obesity rate in adults went from 15% to 40%. So this is not right. Also, our eating changed and rates of heart disease skyrocketed. So at the beginning of the 20th century, heart disease was a very uncommon cause of death. By the middle of the century, of the 20th century, it had become the most common cause of death. So we, at this point, tend to think high blood pressure, pretty normal. Everybody in my family has it. Heart disease, pretty normal. These are just diseases of aging that a lot of us are going to get, like it's naturally occurring. But it wasn't naturally occurring. It wasn't normal 100 years ago. High blood pressure in 1890, among people over 65, less than 5% of them. Now you look at the whole population of adults, over 33% of all adults have high blood pressure. So that's up more than 600%. So what changed? Our diets, the massive increase in added sugars and sweeteners and processed grains, processed foods. So how we eat is the biggest driver of heart disease. And so 80% of heart disease is considered preventable, related to our diet and exercise. And what about the prevalence of diabetes? Very serious disease that has been skyrocketing also. In 1880, the prevalence of diagnosed diabetes was only 3% of the population. It's increased by over 300%. So we know now that diagnosed diabetes is represented in 10 to 12% of the population. And it's very clear that that's an underestimate of the rate of diabetes. In 1890, 75 out of 100,000 people were diagnosed with diabetes. In 2012, it was 8,000 out of 100,000 people, and it keeps rising all the time. Maybe you've seen dialysis centers cropping up everywhere. I remember seeing that. So what changed? So the human body has worked this way for millennia. It protects us from starvation. What changed is our food environment. I would call it deranged. There's a lot of us that feel like it is so wrong, we can call it deranged. Something went very wrong with our eating, and it's producing serious negative consequences. We see it in the United States and Canada, all through the UK and Europe. In Australia, just about everywhere in the world now, the Western diet has transplanted. You might have seen people talking about the China study. The doctors in urban Chinese areas were all of a sudden having to address obesity and heart disease. And they wondered, what is going on? Why are we having so much of this? They weren't seeing it in rural China. It's because in urban Chinese centers, people had taken up the processed foods. This Western diet of processed foods has spread all over the world. And yesterday, as we talked about, now we find that 73% of our food supply is ultra processed. Less than 30% of our food is actually nutritious and healthy. So the way I understand part of what's going on, part of why I keep feeling hungry if I eat processed foods, is my body says, but we were eating, but we didn't get any nutrition. Keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going. So the whole package of problems is kind of awful, right? 4 of the top 10 causes of death now have well-established links to our diet. So what changed? If you look at the food pyramid there, once the United States government started making recommendations, I talked about this yesterday, the scientists who had provoked this, we need to look at this, we need to make recommendations to Americans, got pushed off the panels, and the panels got filled with food industry representatives defending their interests. And the researchers were saying people are eating too much meat. They shouldn't be eating this much meat, and they need to be eating more fruits and vegetables. Well, that wasn't going to make anybody rich. So what they ended up pushing, instead of we need to eat less meat and more vegetables, they started pushing low fat. right? We need to eat less fat, and it's certain kinds of fats, and it's been this complicated thing. And we really did change how much fat we were eating, right? So Americans reduced our fat intake from 45% to 35% daily intake. So what did we increase to make up for it? We vastly increased processed foods. Processed grains, you see that as the bottom of the pyramid. Like that's the primary food we should be eating. No, this has not been helpful to us. The other thing is when you take the fat out of foods, so people look and say, oh, good, this doesn't have too much fat. It doesn't taste good. So what they added was sugar. And they found a lot of ways to add sugar and make us feel good about it, right? And then we have all these cultural ideas that really lead us astray about what's healthy and what's good to eat and how to lose weight. Just want to show this picture of how much our sugar consumption changed. The reason I like to show this is because a lot of us feel like, I don't eat that much sugar. I'm really not too bad about this. But if you look at how sugar consumption has increased from 4 pounds of sugar a year in 1700 to 18 pounds of sugar a year in 1800, well, if we'd stopped there, we might have been okay. Then we went to 90 pounds of sugar a year in 1900. And by 2012, the average American was eating 180 pounds of sugar, eating or drinking. And the diabetes rate and the heart disease rates and the weight gain all increased with it. Also, dental caries, right? People didn't used to get dental caries until they started eating this processed food kind of diet. So our bodies can't tolerate this. Our bodies are screaming. They're doing what they can to fix the problem, right? So added sugars are a huge problem. Tomorrow, I'm going to talk about why it's so hard to stop, even though we kind of know that, why we make excuses for the amount of sugar in our diet. It affects our hormones. The way we're eating has big effects on our hormones. It has big effects in our gut and on inflammation throughout our system. That's something I really learned through my own experience changing my eating. Wow. My pain and inflammation completely transformed when I transformed my eating. I didn't know that was possible. They're getting a lot better understanding of this stuff now. What the researchers are saying is it looks like we've flipped a biological switch. So this tendency to put on excess weight and feel extra hungry and have excess cortisol and anxiety, so we're driven to find more food and to slow our metabolism and store excess fat. It's like we flipped a biological switch in our bodies. So they studied this with animals that are getting ready to hibernate, for example, like bears, like they're just foraging like crazy. They're eating a lot. They're eating as much sugar as they can, right? They're eating a lot of fruit. And so one of the things we find is throughout world history, there have been a couple of giant extinction events where most animals died and a lot of people died. And the people who survived, our ancestors, right, the ones who stayed around to make it possible for us to live, were the ones who developed these mechanisms to store excess fat when it seemed like there was starvation happening. Because our eating approach, our eating environment has inadequate nutrition, and our way of coping with the storing excess fat is to try to eat less, we've made this worse and worse and worse. The approach that we're taking to try to solve the problem is based on a false understanding of how our bodies work and how weight loss works. What they find is with animals who are in low nutrition environments, they develop this capacity to store excess fat. And they're going to use that excess fat to survive, right? Both in terms of food, calories, and in terms of water, like excess fat storage. Bears are able to survive without eating or drinking for months because their excess fat gives them food and water. We can flip this biological switch back so it's making us healthy and slender again. It's not a matter of trying to force your body to let go. That the body's going to fight back. Now you're in a fight with your body. It's the wrong approach. Does this make sense? What questions does this provoke for you? We can flip this switch off. It feels totally different. So this is where my clients will tell me, I feel like the weight is coming off quite naturally. So I felt like kind of falling off. It's not like I'm forcing it off. It's just coming off a little at a time, week after week, consistently, right? So I really want to give you this idea that we don't want to force our bodies. We're not trying to force our bodies. So I'm going to go get surgery. I'm going to have my stomach shrunk so that I'm not hungry, so that I have less hunger. Or I'm going to take these pills that make me have less hunger and slow how fast the food leaves my gut. These are not necessary, and they're not the best way to help our body succeed. The best way is to figure out how truly healthy eating actually works and then fall in love with it, right? So, can you see any ways you've been trying to force your body to release excess weight? And can you see that you might want to take a different approach? So, we don't want our body to perceive a lack of nutrition. I can make all the arguments I want. Like, one of the things my family used to do is on Sunday nights, we're just gonna like have popcorn. We called it pickup food, but it is basically we're gonna snack all night. We're not gonna eat real food. It's interesting because that was such a happy experience for me that I decided I was gonna do that every night. Like, there were years I'm trying to lose weight, so I'm gonna eat popcorn every night and drink wine instead of having real food. Like, all I got to do is manage the calories, right? This did not pay off for me in the long run. And when I really got serious, like, I've got to make a change, and all my ways of trying to manipulate this aren't working. I got to try to figure out what will actually work for my body. My whole mindset, it makes me want to cry, because not only did I start losing the weight and losing all the symptoms that I was having that went along with ill health and reverse prediabetes, etc. But I just really was feeling differently towards my body. Like, okay, I'm going to try to do my best. I'm going to really try to do my best to figure out what you actually need and give it to you. Not 30% nutritious foods, not even 50% or 60%. I'm going to really push towards 100% highly nutritious foods. It just honestly makes sense. It may not be what I was taught growing up. In fact, when I started studying the research about how much nutritious foods we actually have to eat to change this, to get this big change in our results that lasts, I kind of felt like it was mean. I don't want to eat that much nutritious foods. Where's going to be the space for the popcorn and wine? And I just started realizing my body doesn't actually need popcorn and wine. And I can make all the arguments I want about it, but I'm just arguing with reality. It'd be better if I figure out how my body works and figure out how to feed it what it needs. Lily is one who I love her story, because she was very disciplined dieter, very good at calorie cutting, and it always worked, and she believed it until she hit menopause, and then everything changed. She says, I had my first hot flash, and a month later, I was 13 pounds heavier. And the more she tried this eat less, exercise more approach that always worked in the past, the worse it got, the more her weight climbed. She did it for 10 years. She quit her bottle of wine a day habit and didn't lose an ounce. She was feeling so bad about it. She was avoiding visiting her friends, and she was even about to explore surgery, cool sculpting, at $8,000. The next step in forcing the body to look how we want it to look, right? Now, she's really glad she took the chance to learn a truly healthy eating approach that would get her slender in like naturally, that would reset her body naturally to slender. She says, I got the whole formula. I had a bunch of pieces figured out, but I really didn't have the whole formula. How much proteins, how much fats, how much fruits and vegetables and whole grains should I eat? Once she got that, she started very naturally dropping the excess weight. She was really enjoying, like, she was one of those people starving herself. So the abundance of food felt really good. She never felt hungry. And she feels so happy in her healthy, fit appearance again. By the way, any of you who end up working with me, if you could get a before picture, it's really beneficial. Really helps show other people what a difference it makes, right? She thoroughly enjoys eating this way, and she loves that it just keeps working. She says, like magic. So here's the simple truth. It's not dieting or focusing on eating less that gets you a natural reset of your weight to slender. It's focusing on giving your body abundant, real, whole, nutritious foods, closer to 100% than 30. In the current culture, that might even sound mean, but that's just arguing with reality. That's how our bodies work. It's wishful thinking to think, I think I should be able to have candy and wine and popcorn and, all kinds of junky things. I think I should be able to. I don't think they're that bad. I think they're benign. I believe they were benign for a long time, but everything changed in my body when I changed my mind. Like I'm just giving my body nutritious foods, only nutritious foods, pretty much. And it made this massive difference. And I fell in love with it. It's not hard. So our bodies work how they work, and we're not going to force them to work differently. We can either understand them better and care for them dramatically better than the average person, dramatically better, or resign ourselves to the fact that our bodies are going to have to compensate for the harm of eating the way we eat in this food environment. And the good thing I have to share is I hear from women every week in the Slender for Good program. It's simple. It's easy. It's not hard. It's thoroughly enjoyable, and it just keeps working. So what can you do to bust out of the mindset of I just have to eat less? So flip the switch, change what's happening in your biology by changing how you're feeding your body. Not actually hard, it's just quite different from the way we're eating. We have flipped a switch toward metabolic disease and excess weight gain, right? We can flip the switch back. It's not a matter of forcing the body, it's a matter of feeding the body well. So the principle here is we need to eat better, not less. The exercise I want to give you is to identify 2 fruits and 2 vegetables you like. Eat them tomorrow, whole, not juiced. Eat them mindfully with gratitude. So the number one priority I discovered that puts us on the right path is to start eating abundant, highly nutritious foods. I'm not talking about the healthy alternatives of the highly processed food-like substances that we hope are pretty benign, relatively healthy, pretty good for us. But I'm talking about real, whole, unequivocally nutritious foods like whole fruits, whole vegetables, whole proteins, fats, and whole grains. And I want to encourage you to stay to the end because these mindset shifts I'm giving build day after day. I'm seeking to give you a big enough mindset breakthrough that your readiness to succeed with this habit change of healthy eating to get naturally slender is going to have moved up several rungs. We can fall in love with these foods. Actually, even our taste buds start to appreciate them more. Our gut starts to appreciate them. Our sleep starts to transform our energy, our cholesterol. I'm thinking of one person who's here with me. So tomorrow we're going to talk about how can we start to recognize what's in the way of seeing what's truly healthy, and how can we recognize what's completely different about this path of truly healthy eating that gets us naturally slender. There is significant unlearning involved in learning what's different, right? Because we have lived our whole lives in this deranged food environment. It's not hard to eat abundant, highly nutritious foods. It's kind of gorgeous, right? And it's very rewarding, but it does require clarity and intention and stepping off that path and onto a whole different path. But it does end up being so worth the effort. All right, I went a little longer today. This topic it's rich. What do you guys think? What stays with you? What questions does it leave you with? And for those of you who are watching later on the recording, we can put these comments in the Facebook group, right? We can have those conversations. What thoughts? I work on this stuff over and over and over and over because I know the prerequisite understandings people need to even be able to learn what actually works and start doing it. Like people will tell me, just give me the answers. Can you just give me the diet? And I just don't because it doesn't help. It doesn't help at all. You're grateful for the repeat truth because the old ways are deep. I know, right? It's really kind of amazing. Well, I'm really grateful that you came today, and I hope you'll come tomorrow and we'll talk about, well, how do we actually start to see the difference? All right, glad you guys came. Hope to see you tomorrow. Take care.